Welcome to another segment of the Grassy Knoll. We have with us today Dean Henderson. He is the author of a book with probably the longest title we've ever had on the show. It's Big Oil and Their Bankers in the Persian Gulf. 4 Horsemen, 8 Families and Their Global Intelligence, Narcotics, and Terror Network. That's a heck of a title, and it's a heck of a book, and here with us is Dean Henderson to talk about it. And can I ask you something? Is that a redeveloped title that you made for the second edition, which was also expanded?
No, actually, it's the original title, and yeah, it's a long one, but I just didn't know how to say it any smaller.
And you didn't. But why don't we do that, though? I tell you what, if you don't mind, what does that whole title refer to? Because, 4 Horsemen can be taken a couple of ways, and we're talking about Notre Dame here. So why don't you give us a rundown on what that title really does mean?
Sure. Well, the main title, Big Oil and Their Bankers in the Persian Gulf, turns out it's actually kind of a double entendre, because we're talking about Big Oil and their bankers in the Persian Gulf, which means Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Qatar, and Oman, which formulate the Gulf Cooperation Council, because they actually, bankroll, really the entire world economy, because petrodollars get recycled back into U.S. Treasury bonds. It also means Big Oil and their bankers, meaning the international bankers who are of course not only in the Persian Gulf, but everywhere. And then the second part of the title, the subtitle, I guess, is 4 Horsemen, 8 Families and Their Global Intelligence, Narcotics, and Terror Network, because the book really is about the intersection of drugs, guns, and warfare. And 4 Horsemen that I'm referring to, it's a phrase that I've coined to describe the 4 major oil companies that remain standing after all this merger mania. Essentially a reformulated Standard Oil Trust on the North American side, owned mostly by the Rockefellers. That would be Exxon Mobil and Chevron Texaco. On the European side, you have Royal Dutch Shell and BP Amoco, mostly owned by the Rothschild families and the royalty of Holland and England. The 8 families are the 8 families who literally control most of every private world central bank, including our Federal Reserve. And, of course, they have an intelligence, narcotics, and terror network worldwide. And that's what the book's about, is sort of, following, looking through these 3 commodities and how they intersect, and then sort of following the food chain up to who actually profits from all these things. It turns out to be these central bankers.
Would you mind naming the 8 families?
No, not at all. The 8 families are, Rothschild, Rockefeller, Goldman Sachs, Lehman, Israel Moses, Saif, Warburg, Kuhn Loebs, and I think, did I get them all? Lazards. And 5 of the 8 are European, actually, live in Europe. All of them, of course, originated from Europe, with the exception of the Rockefellers, who early on were given a big boost by the Rothschild family. So,
what about, is Goldman Sachs U.S. based?
Yeah, it's based in the U.S., but interestingly, they've been making some big moves to London and also to Dubai of late. And that's something that in the news lately people may have noticed is, they're basically, they're crying about all the regulations in New York, in the U.S., so there's this big talk about how they're going to move all these, this financial center, from Wall Street more so to the city of London, and also to Dubai. Halliburton may have moved just moved its headquarters to Dubai. So this is part of the dismantling of the United States that's going on with these people.
I've not spoken to you about this, but it's interesting when other people come or have come to the same conclusion. I don't know where you got your documentation, but you also are secure in the knowledge that a power center for sure on this globe is the city of London.
Yeah, that really, Keith, is a theme that runs throughout the book. That basically the British Empire never died. Back in the early 1900s, they formed this business roundtable in London, and that was Lord Rothschild and Alfred Milner and Cecil Rhodes, and they basically sent Cecil Rhodes to South Africa, and he colonized that whole segment. for the British.
Yeah, that's another word for it, yeah.
The Morgans, to finance the Morgans and the railroads over here in America, and the Rockefellers, and the Kuhn Loebs later. Rudyard Kipling went to India. They just sent these guys kind of all over. The Warburgs ended up, in more Eastern Europe, Czars in France, and they really all been very well organized. And this whole globalization process that we're going through and that you hear about all the time is really just this age-old dream of these people where they could basically take the power away from all governments. People talk about a one-world government. The thing is, it's really not even going to be a government. It's going to be basically run by the international bankers, and the key is going to be the currency and how you can get access to it. And we have a smart card coming here in May of '08, where you're going to have a chipped driver's license to get on an airplane. That's in May of next year already. National ID card, basically. And a lot of folks, and myself included, think the next step is going to be a microchip. And if you don't basically have access to that, then you won't be able to buy or sell anything. And that's in the Book of Revelations too, for what it's
all right,
13, 16.
I had some listeners email me. I tend not to get, now I understand where I'm coming from with this, I tend not to get as worked up about the national ID, only to the extent that for the most part it's arguable that our driver's licenses, yours, mine, and everybody, regardless of how many states you've got licenses in, you still have the same number. Also, your Social Security card. However, what does concern me about the national ID card is that if you got it, now is that going to give law enforcement the imprimatur to go ahead and just stop people to see if, in fact, you have your ID card because you just might be a terrorist?
Yeah, I think so, and I think the bigger worry is, for folks like us who are trying to put the word out on these people and expose what's going on. I think you're definitely going to have a target on your head, and they're going to be able to. Apparently, they're going to have RFID chips in these things, and they'll be able to read it. As you're driving down the highway, or as you're in a mall, or in a courthouse, they're going to be able to know, oh, so and so, there he is. So maybe I'll get my card, follow him home, see these guys see going on. I mean, it's just Big Brother stuff, and it's really, to me, it's just totally anti-American.
Sure.
I was fought to get rid of this kind of stuff. So.
Well, that was, I don't know. My thought was just that the ID would be a justification for what we've not really had to deal with across this country, blanketly and consistently. As I've said on other shows, in Florida, I mean, I got stopped in more checkpoints for nothing. Back in the late 80s, things actually got better. But now, no matter where you are or how the law enforcement treats its citizenry, I wouldn't like the fact that they can just stop you just to see if you happen to have your card on you. I think that really is crossing the Rubicon with regard to a big change in America. But let me also bring you back to the first thing you said, which I don't know if I'm aware of. I'm going to ask you to clarify or at least repeat a second time. What did you say about not being able to fly on the airlines?
Well, apparently, if you refuse to get one of these real ID cards, I'm not even clear that you'd be able to drive, but you may be able to just get a regular old driver's license. But I know for a fact that you won't be able to get on an airplane, you won't be able to get on an Amtrak.
Well, that's a good deal in a lot of cases.
Yeah. You won't be able to go into a federal building. That's probably a blessing. Just things like that. And, but it's just another infringement. I know Aaron Russo, I don't know if you've seen his movie. Been on Free Speech TV. It's called Freedom to Fascism. Very good movie. In fact, I just saw it last night. And he's sort of making the plea that that's where we need to draw the line, and nobody should accept this real ID card. That should be where people draw the line, because if we don't draw the line, then comes maybe the microchip. And that's not pretty.
Well, that is...
livestock,
That is coming, and I think that's when the corporations finally hold sway. And you either play at their trop or you don't play at all.
Pretty much. You won't be able to eat. And I don't know about you, but that's, I'm not going to take a microchip in my head or my arm. That's where I draw the line, and come what may. Put it that way.
I want to just go back, because one of these that you mentioned, in fact, one we just went over a second time, this bit about flying. I don't know what went through your mind, but I'm going to ask you, because I know something did, with regard to this whole TB thing and the way airlines looked at it. And if you go back and you think they were going to do some kind of scan to see if you had a temperature, God forbid you had to run through the airport to get on the plane. your body temperature might be up, and it's like, nah, you can't fly. I'm just wondering if we're getting to a point also. They're trying to make air travel as disgusting as it can be. And I'm wondering if we're going to see something where it's like, well, do you have your shots? Otherwise, you can't get on this plane. What do you think about that?
Oh yeah, they're using so many different angles to scare the hell out of people. I mean, it's all about fear, and that's just another case of fear. You know, this SARS stuff and all this.
Avian flu, yeah.
Yeah, and all this stuff. I mean, it's just fear, and control, and we just got to shake this fear. It's just pathetic to me that Americans have bought into this fear like this. It's just preventing any sort of visionary, political movement, any sort of change, any sort of anything that's real American. I mean, I don't think people realize our founding fathers, for all their faults. I mean, these guys went out of line and basically committed treason against the monarchy and fought them to the death, and a lot of them died. And it's the same monarchy that is lording over us with all this technology and all their banks and everything. It's the same people. Same exact people, and people don't realize that, founding fathers, they wanted to get away from the big business in England. I mean, that's what the Revolutionary War was really about. The fact that small business people in the colonies were trying to get their little businesses going. These big business cartels, like the East India Company, didn't like the competition, and that's what the Boston Tea Party was all about. That's why they dumped that tea. They had to send their stuff through England to get pay tax, pay duty, just so they could re-export it to Portugal or Spain, and they got fed up with it. And it's the same kind of fight that we have today against globalization, against NAFTA, against these bankers, and it's the same people, the same institutions that we have to fight. And so pathetic to me to see, American response to it is this fear and allowing these people to scare the hell out of us. I mean, we come from a rough and tumble stock of people who weren't afraid of anything. And that is the biggest obstacle right now to any kind of change, is just people have got to get over their fear. It just really...
It's so true. And this could be something locally, and it can be, as we're saying, nationally, and that is whenever you're put in a mode where you are driven by fear, so to speak, and it could be by a real threat, you're put in a defensive mode, and all your energy and, all your creativity is put into trying to stop something from happening, and for a nation especially, too, not only for a family, given whatever threat they might be facing, but, I mean, nationally, a whole people never seem really to be able to do anything further intelligently, compassionately, because they're always just caught in the situation of trying to fend off where it's coming from next. It really is something that just sucks the life right out of you.
Yeah, and they've been working on that for years, but, of course, 9/11 was the huge catalyst for that. And, my chapter 20, the last chapter of my book, is titled 9/11. It's all the evidence that I have that, that they either knew about it, let it happen, or it was an inside job. And honestly, the more I study it, the more I believe it actually was an inside job, and that the neocons, had a pivotal role in this thing, Richard Pearl, changing these people. You follow that food chain up, and, people talk about the neocons, and they're kind of familiar with who they are. But it's sort of the way it goes as well. The neocons are beholden to Israel. I mean, Richard Pearl, Douglas Fife, some of these people worked for the government of Israel before they worked for the Bush administration. And then Israel's beholden to the city of London because, basically Israel's always been, I talk about this a lot in my book, but it's always been more of a pivot in the Middle East for the Rockefeller, Rothschild oil interests than it was ever about being in some kind of Jewish homeland. I mean, they put the Jews in harm's way, basically. They didn't give a damn about the Jewish people. They wanted some entity to protect their oil. And so that's why Mossad, is pretty much a surrogate of the CIA and British intelligence. And so then you look at the city of London, this totally unregulated $0 market where all the petrodollars run through, all the drug money goes through, all these little protectorates, the Cayman Islands, Bermuda, Bahamas. That's all British, and it's all secretive. And then, so then you look at, basically what happened was the Roman Empire, the Knights Templar, all their loot, all their gold that they got from Solomon's Temple, got kicked out of Italy. Pope Clement, got together with, King Philip of France, and they hung Jacques de Molay on Friday the 13th, and they sent these guys packing. Or went to Scotland, founded Scottish Rite Freemasonry, backed King James, who rewrote the Bible, and, to throw people off balance. and basically got behind the House of Windsor, and that's kind of how that went. And so basically the people that killed, literally the people that killed Jesus Christ, have moved from the Roman Empire to the city of London. And Rothschild and the Warburgs and the Habsburgs, actually the Habsburg family, which ran, Prussia for many years, still the kings of Spain. King Philip of Spain is a Habsburg. The King of Austria is a Habsburg. The King of Belgium is a Habsburg. These people, incredibly powerful. They actually have the Spear of Destiny, apparently, in one of their mansions that actually killed Jesus Christ. It's like a trophy to these people. So there's continuity here, and you follow the money, and then you get to the city of London, and then brothers, these bankers, and that, the House of Rothschild, which is the biggest, N.M. Rothschild and Son, is where they gather every day. 5 banks in London gather, and they literally, they fix the price of gold. They just fix it. They even call it that. Just right out in the open. How can 5 banks fix the price of gold? But they do.
Oh no.
And I mean, so they just have complete control of our monetary system, and they use debt primarily as a lever, not just debt for you and I, our mortgage, our car payment, to kind of keep us quiet, but, look at the United States debt, look at the third world debt. All this debt that they talk about is owed to these same bankers. Incredible.
I'm going to float something by, and I hope I don't get too out there with it, but I think you're right. I would say that what we're seeing is the Second Holy Roman Empire. And it does seem, because I lay the perfidy and the provocateuring on this globe at the feet of the Vatican, which I do not see as religious, but as the nation state it is, and with their network. But not only the Vatican, but also the Rothschilds have used Britain, in a very integral situation. And I'm going to go this far and say this. When you look at the destabilization of the Middle East at the beginning of the 20th century, they were the Brits. I mean, they weren't the only ones there, but certainly they were there. And made these proclamations like the Balfour Declaration and such.
Sure.
And I do believe that the City of London availed itself of the British government and its military to do this. But, on the other hand, too, I believe the Vatican and the City of London have used Britain more or less as what Master was to Blaster in Thunderdome, the UK was to the United States, this new beast on the block. And I believe the United States has been more or less chaperoned, if you will, probably a poor choice of words, but like I said, the Master Blaster thing, that they got the United States to do kind of like the wet work that Britain used to with its military, to have that Holy Roman Empire and the British Empire in a way almost congruous. What do you think about that possible theory?
Yeah, I think it's right on the money. And you look at Iraq, for example. We fund the war. Our boys die. Primarily, the British send this little token contingent who gets the big oil contract to manage the oil in Iraq. Royal Dutch Shell got it. That's who. Anglo-Dutch company. Big time owned by Queen Juliana of the Netherlands and Victor Rothschild. Mainly those two people own almost all of that company. Incredible. We do the heavy lifting. The British, they got real smart about, these kind of things. I mean, they were masters at divide and conquer. Look what they did in India, turning the Muslims against the Hindus. Look what they did all over their empire. They were sort of known as the nice colonialists. They were as brutal as the Portuguese, but they were great at buying people off. And really, honestly, the way I look at George Bush, I've traveled to 40 countries. I'm 42 years old. I've traveled around the world a bunch, and you start doing that, and you'll start seeing these same sort of symbols of British Empire everywhere. It's incredible. Singapore, you go to Singapore, you'll see, the Standard and Chartered Bank. You go to Hong Kong, there's HSBC sitting there next to the biggest Mason Lodge in the world. You start just noticing these things, and basically, after coming back from this last trip, I really consider George Bush to be a traitor. And I'm dead serious about that. I think he's basically an agent working for the British Empire, working for the old King George, working for a counter-revolution against the United States to basically take us back and put us under their, and I consider people like us, to be the real Americans, the real patriots. And I think he's a traitor, and I'm nothing short of that, really, because, people call him stupid, but, I don't think so. I don't think he's stupid at all. I think he's being told what to do, and I think they are literally destroying America on purpose. Because we have, you know how it is with Noriega or Saddam, like with CIA stuff. Okay, well, you use them to run your drugs. You use them to gas curbs. You pay for it. Bechtel builds a gas plant. And then all of a sudden these guys get uppity and you got to kill them. Well, it's kind of, and they're out there welcome and they get a bad reputation. Well, the United States, really, that's what we've been doing with these European bankers, and yes, primarily for this City of London crowd since World War II. Well, our reputation now is sullied. Everybody hates us around the world because of our foreign policy. I think and I talk about this towards the end of my book, I think they're really ready to sort of pull the plug on us, just like, a la Noriega or Saddam. And their money, they'll probably, who knows, they may move their money and start back in Russia and China. Who knows what they're going to do. But I really think that there's a critical moment here and that George Bush is sort of their point man and sort of putting the knife in the back of the United States once and for all. And that's how serious this is. If people want to survive, it's not about left or right or Democrat or Republican. If you want to survive in an America that's free and where you're not eating beans and rice because the dollar's worth about what a Mexican peso is, then people better get in gear and start shouting it out, and doing something about it, because that's where we're heading.
All right, before we go on any further, we just want to stop again. I'll remind people you're listening to Dean Henderson. He's the author of, and this is the full title, Big Oil and Their Bankers in the Persian Gulf, Four Horsemen, 8 Families, and Their Global Intelligence, Narcotics, and Terror Network. Now, I believe, Dean, you don't have a website of your own per se, but how can people find out about this book and order it?
Yeah, actually, it's the second edition. I published the first one. I self-published it. It was a real uphill battle, but I sold out of them. Roamed over 15 different countries and probably 40 different states. It's mail order. And second edition, hot off the press. I just got my copies 3 days ago, and you can get a copy. If you can get a copy, it's $22. It's a 536-page book, over 900 footnotes. They can call 800-729-4131, or you can visit www.nohoax.com. And that's George Green at Global Insights, and their publishing house is Bridger House Publishers. But yeah, 1-800-729-4131, or just go to www.nohoax.com.
And I tell you, that's quite a book. I mean, usually we don't talk price, but $22, that's a pretty value priced
Seems like it, yeah.
number for that length of work and research that went into it. So that doesn't make it any less attractive, for sure. So we might as well mention that as well.
You bet.
Let's go back, if you will. One of the things I was wondering about as we were talking about the City of London, which that's a little murky. Certainly Quigley did much to tell the world about Rhodes and Milner. But you know what group gets left out, and I think it's very curious by its absence. Did you ever come across a group begun in 1904, right at the end of Rhodes' life, called the Pilgrim Society?
No.
Yeah.
What do you know about that?
Well, I'll tell you what. Take a look into that, if you will. There are 2 books out there, one written by one of the members early in the 20th century, and it's kind of let me just say they're both love pieces. Okay. There's another one done recently, which is kind of like an authorized biography of the group, but again, it isn't giving away too much, except you get some great photos and also the meetings that they've had when they've called conferences and such throughout the years, and who were the luminaries that were guests, basically. It is an Anglo-American, to use Quigley's words, both England and the United States, association, and I'm just wondering why not a whole lot was said about that. It's almost like, somebody once said to me that when you get told a lot about what's supposed to be inside stuff, you got to wonder why. So here Quigley kind of opens the box a little bit for us on the round table and the kindergarten. But we never hear about the Pilgrim Society, and you got to wonder if that's, that's really where things are getting done, and why don't we know more about it? But if you ever do a Google, Charles Savoy, Savoie, plus Pilgrim Society, and you'll find a 3-piece part he did, spread out all over the web. But I'd like to know your take on that in time to come, because that's something that kind of like, snuck by when no one was looking.
Yeah.
But beyond that, you were saying also about we're looking at a second Holy Roman Empire. You know what's interesting too? When they signed a peace treaty that ended the revolution, King George was the one who drafted it. And I always thought, like, well, if you're the losers, how come you're drafting it? And secondly, one of the names that he refers to himself, as well as his other titles of nobility, is the Elector of the Holy Roman Empire. Very interesting stuff, I think. But, again, let me ask you, in a way, the British Indies Company never died either, did it?
No, those guys, I mean, you look at, one thing people don't realize is that, Adam Smith worked for the East India Company, and that's where he formulated his treatise on capitalism, that, still the Bible of international capitalism there. But, East India Company was basically behind the Opium Wars, and they were, behind the slave trade, and they were bringing slaves to the South, and they were taking cotton back to Europe, and they set up all these old Southern families. The Sutherlands were a big one. They set up all these Boston Brahmin, the Forbes family, the Perkins family, the Hathaways, all these people that are behind the Skull and Bone Society. Those are direct descendants of the East India Company. Credit Suisse at First Boston is probably their repository, though they have others. But no, these things have all just morphed into different, entities, really. And that's what's interesting. In my book, I talk about the drug trade and, how Hong Kong Shanghai Bank Corporation, HSBC, now the number 2 bank in the world as far as size. It's a British bank, but it was founded by the Scottish Hongs, who set up and basically launched the Opium Wars, in China. Jardine Matheson family, the Swire family, Keswicks, the Inchgate family.
Was Delano in there too?
What's that?
The Delano family?
Delano, I didn't come across. Is that Delano Roosevelt?
Well, that'd be one half. Yeah, that's the other side. That gives you your Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
Sure.
But the Delanos seem like they got their noses a little dirty with candy too.
Yeah. All those guys did. That's the thing. They made a lot of money off of that. And the thing is, you look at one example. The P&O lines, P&O Nedloyd, PLNT, Peninsula Orient and Navigation Company. This is the Inchcape Shipping Company that was shipping all this stuff, back in the day from China and based in Hong Kong. People had this big fuss about when Dubai Ports was going to buy, the port, was going to get the lease from the port for the Port of New York. Well, what you didn't hear in the news was that the current operator of the Port of New York was in fact PONC, or P&O Nedloyd, they call it now. They've merged with a Norwegian company. Actually, I think Maersk just bought the whole thing, but these guys, interestingly, still run a lot of ports in the world. They're the biggest port operator in the world. Interesting that Dubai Ports is getting into the game, because Dubai has always been, ever since the Afghan War, Reagan, has always been where they laundered all the drug money from that region. Just like Hong Kong served the Vietnam Golden Triangle drug traffic, Dubai is what they set up to service the Golden Crescent heroin traffic. And Afghanistan, of course, again, produces 95% of the world's heroin now. And the CIA, of course, everywhere there's a brush fire war, that's where the drug trade sets up. And every time we backed insurgents, there it is. So Dubai is this dirty little place, and that's why it's becoming this financial center like Hong Kong. People don't realize, it's $400 billion a year, the drug trade, $400 billion a year. So it's, oil, guns, and drugs are literally the 3 biggest commodities as far as money on the planet. And that's why, I'm trying to, make people understand the connections.
Well, sarcastically, it is often referred to, not so much as I guess a couple of years ago, maybe I'm just out of the loop, but using God as an acronym then is not necessarily wrong when you say, in God we trust, it's gold, oil, and drugs.
Yeah.
That's a sneaky little laugh, Dean.
I like that.
But, it really does fit. Sadly so, but undoubtedly. You know, now that you mentioned some of the countries in the Middle East, I want to ask you about this. There always seems to be this love-hate relationship with the Saudis. Now, something else occurred a couple of years ago, not that long, maybe 3. Somebody listens to the show and works for a PR firm out in the Midwest, had some principals of the Qatar royal family come in. And they were very effusive about the fact that they believe their nation, which is quite small, right, would be the richest in dollars and oil in the future. And you know, Qatar was a place where they, where the United States dropped a lot of materiel for this last Gulf War.
Yep.
Rand Corporation also seems to be very fond of it, has built their education city. So here's what I'm going to ask you. Do you have any information, or do you have any, shall we say, bones, anything intuitive, about perhaps Qatar being used by the United States as a hedge if the Saudis get strange? What do you think about that?
Well, yeah, sure. I talk about it's like I say, well, this book started as a master's thesis, and it was called The Political Economy of Middle East Oil. And you think this title was long. I'm going to give you the subtitle of my thesis. It was, The Political Economy of Middle East Oil, the Gulf Cooperation Council, Regional Resource Security State for the regime of international capital accumulation.
Let me ask you something. Well, I'm sorry. Finish the talk, because I want to. Well, here's what I wanted to know.
Yeah.
Because you get it, I get it, but because most academicians don't. Did you have a sponsor? Did you have a prof that was kind of with you, or was it a hard sell?
It was mainly I had 3 good ones on my committee, and the chairman, his name's Dr. Bill Chalupi. He's now the chair of political science at Colorado State, and he's actually got a big old endorsement on the back of this book. He's the first, or at the very top, very supportive. There was a few things when you start, naming names. What happened was, what I was getting at was I did. The core of the research in this book is actually about this country you're talking about. The Gulf Cooperation Council was created by Reagan back in 1981. The reason it was created was because before that, there was this thing called the Twin Pillars policy that Nixon enunciated in 1972 on the island of Guam. It's called the Guam Doctrine. But basically, he was enunciating a policy that had been in place since the early 50s, and that policy was this: the Saudis and the Iranians were the twin pillars for the United States and for these bankers in Europe for many years. But because we installed the Shah of Iran, we overthrew Mossadegh. Chapter 1 of my book is called The Shah of Iran and David Rockefeller. And it's all about how basically Chase Manhattan and David Rockefeller, they were one and the same with the Shah, personal piggy bank. Of course, he siphoned out a bunch of money. Well, 1979 came along in a huge event, the Iranian Revolution. So they had to scramble. Because they lost one of those twin pillars. Every time they needed oil or they needed a production increase, they just call the Shah, and he called King Faisal, later King Fahd, and they'd open the spigots and they'd provide oil. Both oil crises, 73 and 78. Turns out these oil companies, these majors, 4 horsemen, were actually stockpiling oil. At the same time, they were raising the price here at home and saying there was a shortage. And they did that thanks to the Shah, thanks to the King Faisal and King Fahd. Anyway, the Gulf Cooperation Council was formed in 81, and it consists of Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, Oman, and the United Arab Emirates. Now, here's the interesting thing. All of these countries were British protectorates. In fact, they began to give these countries independence in 1961, starting with Kuwait, and ending in 1971 when the United Arab Emirates was formed out of 7 different sheikdoms: Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Sharjah, and 4 other smaller ones. They were all put in place by the Crown, and the reason, and actually British mercenaries still constitute the royal guards that protect all 6 of these ruling families. These are all monarchies. They're run by single families. In Qatar, the ruling family you're talking about is the Al Thanis. In Kuwait, it's the Al Sabah. United Arab Emirates, it's the Al Maktoums. In Bahrain, it's the Al Khalifas. And of course, in Saudi Arabia, it's the Fahd family. And then in Oman, it's the Al Qaboos family. These are monarchies. There's no democracy. When they talk about, we're going to trade democracy in Iraq, It's so funny that all our allies in the Middle East are monarchs.
But there you go.
You're going to go create democracy? The only two democratic countries were Iran and Iraq. and Iran's the only one now, because we've got a puppet government in Iraq. So anyway, the British put these little, and the reason was that 42% of the world's oil, even though these are tiny countries, except for Saudi Arabia, 42% of the world's oil lies on that southwestern side of the Persian Gulf. You look on a map that these little countries surround the southwest edge of the Persian Gulf. So, very strategic maneuver. No, they don't want democracy there, for God's sakes. They want dictator monarchs who will play this oil for guns game. You know, they give us cheap oil, we give them guns. We protect the monarchy against not only foreign threats, but against their own people. And they give us, you know, a good price on oil, continuous flow, whatever. Now we're in a little different situation. You know, gas is $3 a gallon, and people say, well, why is that? Well, one reason, of course, is there's four companies, the four horsemen, so there's no competition. That's the obvious reason. The other, which nobody seems to want to talk about on mainstream media, even. But the more interesting reason is the insiders, the builders, these people know that they need a high price for oil right now because Chinese and the Japanese and the Koreans and Russians and Europeans are diversifying away from the U.S. dollar. The book I wrote, the thesis, part of the book talks a lot about this oil, about petrodollar recycling gig. Well, if you've got $70 barrel oil going into Saudi Arabian coffers, instead of $40 oil, you've got that much more money coming back into U.S. Treasury bonds, see? And that's what's propping up the dollar right now and keeping interest rates from just going through the roof. Now, the interesting thing, 2 weeks ago, the Saudi government announced that it was actually going to depeg its dinar from the U.S. dollar. And that's exactly when you saw interest rates start shooting up in the bond market. You know, went from like 4.9 to like 5.25%. So it's possible that even this arrangement is coming apart, and that even those countries are just so angry about Iraq policy that even that's going to come apart. Now we're going to see some help right loose economically.
Before we go any further, I just want to go back again and talk about how people can purchase the book. The short title, I'm just going to do this time, Big Oil and Their Bankers in the Persian Gulf. What do you suggest as far as where people can go? And can they get a little bit of a glimpse inside the covers anywhere on the web? Table of contents or...
Table of contents. You know, I'm not sure if George has that up there. My publisher is Bridger House Publishers, guys. Name is George Green. He's a great guy. I probably need to have him do that if he does. I haven't been to the website for all week.
Yeah, I did it after we spoke.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't find it.
Because when I had my own website, I had the table of contents on there, but I've since shut that down. But yeah, they can go to nohoax.com, and that's the website, or they can call 1-800-729-4131 and to get information or to order a book. And let me just give people, I'll just run through the 20 chapters real quick. It's just Chapter 1 is the Shah of Iran and David Rockefeller. Chapter 2, Hong Kong, Shanghai. It's all about HSBC. Chapter 3, the House of Saud and J.P. Morgan. Chapter 4, Nicaraguan contraband. Chapter 5, Persian Gulf, Renaissance. This is about all these little GCC countries I'm talking about. Chapter 6, Bank of Crooks and Criminals International. It's about BCCI. Chapter 7, The Four Horsemen, gets into the in-depth part of the big oil companies. Chapter 8, Project Frankenstein, Afghanistan. Chapter 9, the Texas Oil Mafia. Chapter 10, Iran-Iraq War. Chapter 11, Noriega, Panama. Chapter 12, Gulf Oil War. It's about the first Gulf War. Chapter 13, USS Persian Gulf. About our huge build-up in the Persian Gulf after that first Gulf War. Chapter 14, Saddam's banker in Atlanta. That's about BNL, Banca Nacional de Lavaro. That big scandal. Chapter 15, Yugoslavia bad, Greater Albania good. That's about the whole conflict in Yugoslavia, which again we were on the wrong side. Chapter 16, the Mexican fast track, all drugs going to be there, and privatization. Chapter 17, Caspian Sea, oil grab, about Russia and how we kind of lopped off these stands and tried to basically when Russia fell, when the Berlin Wall fell, that was a coup d'etat. CIA and the Vatican were behind that whole thing. Chapter 18, the international bankers. Chapter 19, the 8 families, and Chapter 20, 9/11. So kind of, you know, it's chronological, and it also sort of like I say, kind of climbs the ladder. The ladder chapters are where you'll see these bankers. They're in all the chapters, but you know, it sort of climbs the chain of command, in other words, and that's it's kind of run out. But yeah, it's a good idea. I should have George put the table on there. I don't think it's on there right now, but
yeah,
there's a lot of ground. And I guess one thing, you know, had an American Airlines pilot named Steve Dudley order a book for me, a self-published first edition, down in Miami Beach, and you know, I had this happen a few times where a guy would order a book and then they'd order 10 more and just pass them out. And so the people that get this, I guess, they get it. You know, they really. He made that statement, and that he said your book ties together more things than any other I've come across. I've got a collection of about 300 conspiracy-related books, but you really got into the heart of the matter. So, I mean, that's what I'm hoping that it does do is it ties together everything from, you know, JFK assassination to Panam 103 to BCCI to Iran-Contra. All our foreign policy, all our, you know, everything, and sort of, you know, make sense of it for people, because obviously the mainstream media, you know, is not going to do that.
Well, you left out Amelia Earhart and the Lindbergh baby. I mean, come on.
I do have a quote from Charles Lindbergh, though.
That's close enough. All right.
Yeah, he was quite a rebel. He
was
into the whole, you know, banker. Yeah, he was.
I don't often talk about this as well. But I was intrigued by the cover of the book. It raises a lot of questions. I mean, it's very evocative. Can I ask you, with the inset of the 4 swatches, if you will, of the American flag, any reason why you ran the stripes vertical and the 1 pane? To me, it looks like almost like a 4-pane window. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Did you have any input on that, and who was the artist that did that?
It's kind of funny. Honestly, the first edition, that's what you're seeing on the net. The second edition, the cover is slightly different. They had some issues with trying to scan it. I think it's a little bit more interesting. It's just got $100 bills overlaid over the whole thing.
Okay.
Like, that's about the only difference. It looks pretty much the same. But actually, no, it was just a stock cover. I went through, you know, when you self-publish, you try to find the, you know, the reliable printer that'll be short-run publishing, and I found this place, Morris Publishing, up in Kearney, Nebraska, and that was the best I found, and they did just a heck of a job. It was just a stock cover that they had, but I like the way it kind of, you know, it's kind of patriotic, but not in a, you know, but in a kind of a way that's kind of like, well, yeah, but things are a little goofy, you know, and that's why the flag, and things are a little upside down. So are we really the land of the free and the home of the brave, you know?
There's an undercurrent there, and I'm wondering if this is reminding me from something back in the 70s. When these things happen to me, it's scary to think, but something deep in the recesses of my mind has been triggered by this. And I'm thinking Neil Young or something. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I got to take a look. Huh?
I love Neil Young, so that would be all right with me.
All right, well, all right. This will be something else I'll wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and start surfing the net for. But anyway, it's a good-looking book, and that goes for mostly what we always hope, and that is what's between the covers. Going back to what I broached with you, and that you did carry the ball with, what I'm going to ask you to do is focusing on that one interesting country, barely a country, a principality, but Qatar. I mean, are there our little, you know, pet pupil out there, or what?
I'm sorry, little what?
Like you know how like teacher has a pet and stuff
like a pupil. I got you. Yeah, sure. All those countries are. I mean, yeah, every one of those countries is. They just. In fact, Chapter 5. That's why I call it Persian Gulf Renashake, because I mean, that's, you know, it's literally what they are. They're Renashakes. I mean, you know, one guy said one time, well, New York Times one time said, you know, Kuwait's more of an oil company with the flag than it is a country. I mean, you know, they're not real countries. Yeah. They're just these entities that we set up. The oil companies own all the infrastructure in these countries. They made some, you know, big waves about, oh, we're going to nationalize this and that, but really, you know, there was all token stuff, because the Four Horsemen still control all the shipping contracts, the refineries. You know, Bechtel builds all the refineries in these countries. So KBR lately, you know, Kellogg's subsidiary Halliburton. But, you know, Qatar's got a lot of gas. That's what's unique about Qatar or Qatar or whatever it is. It's the top, the second largest natural gas reserves in the world. And so we put this Camp Snoopy in there on the outskirts of Doha, which is also interesting. That's where they have the Doha round. And, we put fighter jets at two bases, F, Silia and Al Udeid, I think they were pronounced. And then, they have that World Trade Organization thing. And, but basically, Exxon Mobil has a huge presence in Qatar. They're the biggest in that country. But it's kind of all split up. You go to Kuwait and it's Chevron, Texaco. It was always BP and Gulf. Now it's Chevron, Texaco because they bought Gulf, see, and BP who kind of get the dibs there. And then United Arab Emirates, it's kind of all carved up. Conoco's got a little chunk of it. Conoco would be now that they've merged with Phillips, would be kind of a distant fifth horseman, but they're way back actually still from these other four.
Well, you remember that line from the Simon and Garfunkel's tune that said, "The signs of the times are written on subway walls."
Yeah.
Tenement halls. And I find that if you just drive through America, the signs of the times are in the marquees and the changing faces of two things that I have found in a whirlwind: banks and oil companies.
Yeah.
One day you go by and it's like, oh, it's Bergen State Bank. The next day you go by, it's NatWest. And then the third time you go by, it's something else. And with the gas stations, this one on the corner in the town above from where we are, you could almost see what's going on in the petrol world, because it was like, first it was, then it became BP, then it became Mobil this, and it's like, the monopolies are back. Don't talk about, we got to stop them. They're here.
They're here. Yeah, what we need now is we need somebody in Congress that has the guts to bring up the fact that we need to enforce our antitrust laws and literally break these companies up, see? Because like Exxon and Mobil, that just happened in 2001, that merger.
Yeah.
And those were two of what Anthony Sampson, back in 1975, he wrote a book called The Seven Sisters. And that got, that phrase got kind of famous. And so this is kind of a play on that, because the Seven Sisters are now four. Gulf was bought by Chevron, and then Chevron merged with Texaco to make Chevron Texaco, and that happened in 2000. And I think ExxonMobil merged in 2001. BP bought Amoco, which at that time would have been the eighth sister. They were a big company. And see, these are all, Amoco was Standard Oil of Indiana. Chevron was Standard Oil of California.
Right.
Mobil was Standard Oil of New York. Exxon was Standard Oil of New Jersey.
Chevron was Indiana. Yeah.
Companies.
Right.
So the bottom line is, and I talk about it in my book, the whole history of it, but the bottom line is the Standard Oil Trust, which Congress and the Supreme Court eventually, in 1912, dissolved, officially, actually, when that happened, they got stronger because they just split up and became their own companies. And so now what's happening is they're coming back together. It's, like I say, it's a reformulated Rockefeller Standard Oil Trust.
Well,
Charles, on that side.
What do you think about this little possibility, which I can substantiate, but, anyway, let me run this by you. To me, the very first president who gladly gave himself over, having a good awareness of the fact that three presidents who changed their minds were shot within 40 years. That's Lincoln, McKinley, in the line that it happened, it's Lincoln, Garfield, McKinley. And so Teddy's in, and, Teddy Pax Americana Roosevelt, and he has no problem. So he goes out there and he does his yada-yada about trust busting, and he goes about it, and everybody's like, yay, Teddy. And then Philander Knox, a lawyer for the robber barons, undid whatever Teddy did. So it was like, yeah, everybody was yay Teddy, but Philander was taking care of business to them. However, have you heard this Philander Knox? He's the guy who rammed through. He was there for that, and the income tax, which he claimed was ratified, and that's it. It's over with, folks. We've got it.
Yep.
And they're like, no, we never did. So
no, it never was ratified.
No. This guy just comes out of a snowbank, before Christmas or whatever it was with the IRS, with the income tax, and he says, okay, it's through, see you later. And then Jersey's like, no, wait, we retracted our vote, and Ohio had something to say. But what's so funny is that, here a lot of people felt that the antitrust legislation basically, the robber barons said, okay, look, they can bust the trust and all this, we'll take care of it, we'll just be broken into 5, 6, 7 pieces, but it's no problem. And what the antitrust did was prevent anybody from coming after them and catching them. As far as other business enterprises.
Yeah, sure. sure. Yeah, and you see that over the years, throughout the years, just how, I mean, basically, people, I mean, how they basically use the government to bust up competition and, knock out, like, all these independent oil companies, like Sinclair. Sinclair was actually kind of a maverick bunch, but they basically, by going international, that was how these companies were able to, because these other companies just didn't have the scale, and then the government would come in and would do them favors and stuff, and like Dwight Eisenhower. I mean, Eisenhower got a 476-acre ranch, in Virginia from Sid Richardson and Clint Murchison, these two, Texas oil barons. Murchison was involved in the Kennedy assassination.
You're not saying that I took the cheese, did he?
Yeah.
Mr. Military Industrial Complex took the cheese.
He took the cheese, and so did Robert O. Anderson, as Secretary of State. He got a big ranch out in Texas, and later on the Contras are running drugs through there, the CIA.
It's a coincidence.
Like they were in Mena, Arkansas, so.
Yes.
Yeah, but they're all, I mean, it's just such a history of that, and you look at what we've got ahead of us now, it's the same old stuff. I mean, you don't become the nominee for president of your party, party, unless you're in their pocket.
No, the last one to change his mind about the way things should be is Kennedy, and I think everybody got a lesson from that. If you needed one,
Yeah, I mean, I think, talking about that fear we were talking about earlier, I mean, I think that's when the real fear started. I think that act that they did, killing Kennedy, and that, by the way, in my research anyway, leads right back to British intelligence and this European Fondy. Schlumberger, had a big part in these old Radziwill family, the Polish, old money, Eastern European and white Russians, at the behest of the bankers. But anyway, that was a big fear thing, and that was, I think, designed to sort of say to the American people, you better watch it, because we can do this.
Oh, yeah.
I think ever since then, things have been the same. I mean, you haven't seen the Democratic Party, I guess maybe with the exception of George McGovern, and they haven't really said a peep. The Republican Party,
no.
Well, they just always big business, so I don't know. But it's pretty, I don't know. I like this time around, there's some folks working on this thing called Unity 08, and they're trying to get Ron Paul and Dennis Kucinich to run as a ticket, like independents. And I do think those two guys have integrity, so maybe there's something to it. I think definitely we got to bust up this two-party game. Real important.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll bet the keys to the camper ain't going to happen.
No.
It ain't going to happen.
I wouldn't bet. I definitely wouldn't bet on it either.
No, I mean, it's... No. And we were talking about presidents being handled, but, the heads of state pretty much now across the world understand what the deal is. I don't think any of them really are dedicated to their people. The one thing we're looking at kind of curiously, because it seems that, the lesson has always been from the time that Jesus chased out the money changers in the temple, right up with Kennedy, that if you screw with the bankers, you wind up dead.
Yeah.
And we're looking at this situation with Chavez in Venezuela and Korea in Ecuador saying, if you guys are really flipping the middle finger at the IMF and the World Bank, one of two things are afoot here. In my limited brain, I'm thinking, one, you're playing a role or something like that and getting the people behind you, but something's going to change. Or two, if you're really serious, you're going to die.
Yeah.
Now, if you get a third there, let me hear.
Yeah, I like Chavez, and I like Korea, and I like Evo Morales in Bolivia, and I guess maybe I'm not quite as cynical.
It's me? Yeah, okay.
Good guys. I think they're good guys. That could change, of course. Oh, it seems to, but no, I think the thing here with South America, you got Nestor Kirchner in Argentina, you got, a socialist president in Chile now, a woman, more moderate, I think, but you got Lula in Brazil and Workers' Party and stuff, and what I think is this, I think that the beast is being distracted in Iraq, not to mention, China and Russia, although they're not paying them guys enough attention either. But South America's sort of reached a critical mass, I think, where it's not just Castro anymore or Ortega anymore. Look, Ortega's back in power. He was reelected. I was in Nicaragua in '85 when the Contras were butchering people, and he was in charge, and things were going pretty good. And then, of course, the CIA cut their dogs loose, and they got rid of him, but he's back.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really, there's something happening down there, and I tend to think it's a positive thing. They're talking about this Banca del Sur pulling out of the World Bank and just starting this whole other parallel financial architecture that they can use to actually do real development. Use that oil money in Venezuela for real development finally. I think it's a positive thing, and I think there's been a lot of talk about this for years, but you need to be not the only country. See, if you're the only country, yeah, they'll kill you. And they've tried to kill Chavez, by the way. Well, he was the only real radical. Now you have Correa in Ecuador, you have Morales in Bolivia. It's getting harder all the time, put it that way. That's not to say they had better not watch their backs, because they'll still keep trying. But I think that the other thing we have to remember about these people is despite their history and despite their money and the fact that, yeah, they control the guns and all this, they're really, A, they're not that smart. They're really not. And B, they're not omnipotent. Don't ever resign yourself to that, because they're not. And I don't know about you, but I mean, for myself, I've always got to, obviously I wouldn't have wrote this book and you wouldn't be doing this radio thing you're doing if we didn't believe there was some chance, that we could stop these people and make people aware, and then we could, and I think, like I said, I've traveled a lot, and I actually have a lot of hope for the world. It's America that's really tricky. It's America where I don't see a lot of hope, because people just aren't waking up fast enough. But you go to Malaysia, okay? They had a guy named Mahathir Mohamad. He was president for like 30 years. He'd be on TV. He was the head of the non-aligned nations, not commercial TV, but like free speech TV, railing against the Zionist international bankers and railing against naming names, naming the Rothschilds. This guy, and you should. We just got back from Southeast Asia, and you should see Malaysia. I mean, the infrastructure, the highways, the tunnels, the bridges, better than the U.S. They have an internet city at Petaling Jaya. They call it Cyber Jaya. The whole thing is a Wi-Fi zone with solar panels and drip, water catchment systems off every roof, and sustainable. I mean, there are people, and there are even governments, though not very many, in this world who actually are executing the right thing. Malaysia has always stood up against it. They were one of the first countries stood up against the war. They actually are at the head of an organization now that you've probably never heard of. Most Americans have never heard of. I'd never heard of until I was over there. It's called the D8, and it's the Developing 8, and it's sort of this thing that's in opposition to the G8 and saying, look, wait a minute, we're Brazil's a member, Indonesia, Nigeria. But there can be good government. There can be rebels running things, and it's just a matter of getting a critical mass. Like I say, if you go out there on your own, you're going to get plugged. But I feel like pretty positive about South America, even Central America now. And I don't know. I guess you got to have. I think you got to keep the faith. Hope's different from faith. I don't know if I have any hope, but I got a lot of faith.
I thought you were going to break into you got to have heart.
We got to have that too.
I was just saying, listen, we got to go now.
Forget that.
Oh boy. Well, listen, we got to run, and listen, I want to be wrong about a lot of things I think about. At any rate, this whole thing playing out is interesting, and I'm gonna stick you with this. You said you might come back, and will you do so? Come visit us again on the Grassy Knoll?
Heck yeah, I'd love to. I really would. I really appreciate you having me on, and I just you're doing good work, and I'd really enjoy that. Like I say,
nope.
If people need a copy, I'll just give them that number one more time. It's 800-729-4131, or go to nohoax.com. But yeah, Keith, I really appreciate you having me on.
No problem. And listen, what I'll do is I'll also put up the No Hoax link with your audio in lieu of you having a website, so people can just hit that real quick and get right to what it's all about.
All right.
All right. Listen, I'll hold you to it, and we'll be talking again soon. Thanks very much, Dean.
Sounds good. Thank you, Keith. You have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye now.
Okay. Yep. Bye.
I went home with the waitress, the way I always do. How was I to know she was with the Russians too? was gambling in Havana. I took a little risk. Send lawyers, guns, and money. Dad, get me out of this. Ha! I'm the innocent bystander. Somehow I got stuck between a rock and a hard place, and I'm down on my luck. Yes, I'm down on my luck. Well, I'm down on my luck. I'm hiding in Honduras. I'm a desperate man. And lawyers, guns, and money. The shit has hit the fan. And lawyers, guns, and money. And lawyers, guns, and money. And lawyers, guns, and money. And lawyers, guns, and money.